Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. Okay, so hey, there are times when we all could use a little extra help and support in our lives. Whether there's something you're struggling with or just seeking connection with other people who understand what it's like to be in your situation, Anovia Behavioral Health can help. Anovia is a subscription-based organization that provides unlimited access to a wide variety of educational, experiential, and therapeutic support groups that are led by live expert facilitators. Now, you can get 20% off your membership with the discount code Cookbook20 when you subscribe. Check it out today at AnoviaBH.com. Anovia, feel better. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm Iris Goldfeder, your host, and I actually forgot the name of my own podcast 2 seconds ago. So I know I always say I'm excited about my guests, right? But I am so excited about my guest today, Allison O'Brien. We've been talking for the last couple of months. We've become friends. What she does is so interesting, and we'll get into it. So I'm just going to read her bio and bring her on, but you're going to love her as much as I do. Okay, so Allison O'Brien is a facilitator and master trainer with Echo Listening Intelligence based in Boulder, Colorado. Since 2014, she has been helping to build a worldwide network of listening experts, certifying practitioners to deliver the Echo Listening Profile in 10 countries and across 4 continents. And I will tell you, I took one of the assessments and it was really interesting. Within a broad scope of work, executive leadership coaching, leadership training for new, emerging, and mid-level managers, workplace conflict resolution, and corporate communication training focused on listening. Allison uses 2 assessment tools, the Echo Listening Profile and the Conflict Dynamics Profile. Both instruments provide the crucial insights needed for shifting the way people receive information, share information, and manage their emotion in challenging situations. And it is really good because it when you take it, it makes you see things a little bit differently. And I'm going to encourage everybody to take it. So, a quote by Allison is, "My genuine interest in people and what makes us tick has paved the way for a career helping individuals and companies transform the way they do business through the standpoint of culture, communication, and mostly important, listening. Most importantly, listening. For decades, I've been intrigued by human interaction and the question of what is it that creates connection and how or why do we withdraw and disengage from each other? As I got deeper into my career and had many more interactions in business settings, the follow-up question became, how does the way we communicate impact how we work with others, lead, make difficult decisions collaboratively, and also show up for the people that we love? In asking these questions, it became very clear that my life's purpose is to change the way people live, love, and do business for the better. Let me tell you, it's true. I believe it's rare to work every day in a job that aligns 100% with your core values, passion, and purpose. I'm incredibly fortunate and profoundly grateful to be able to say without hesitation that it's true for me." Awesome. So without further ado, let's bring on Allison. Hi.
Hi, Riz. So good to see you.
You too. Not that we haven't seen each other a million times in the past month, but
Yeah, we're like this.
It's always awesome. Yeah, we're so it was so funny because when I just have to tell you, and the audience doesn't know this, but so I took the assessment and it gave me an idea on how I listen. And so I said to Heather, my wife, last night, I said, so Allison and I were talking, and we think that you need to take the assessment too, because then we know how to, listen to each other and communicate. And at first she laughed, and then she said, that's probably not a bad idea. So we'll have that. But
we're going to do
it. Totally. Because I told her that your husband listens the way that she does. And so, consumes the information. And I told, it's like, well, I heard what you said and I didn't think that it needed a response. It's like, yeah, but I need you to let me know that you hear me. And she just laughed. She's like, I know, I'm really bad at that. So yeah. So tell us about you.
About me in general? Let's see. So I live outside of Boulder, Colorado. I have a couple of kids. I take parenting those two very seriously. They're old now, 22 and 17. And so they don't need as much parenting as they used to, but I'm still, in it. Let's see, I love my mountain bike. That's my passion outside of work. I am in my second marriage now. Definitely would not be married to who I am right now if I didn't do the work that I do, and we can get into that. But if I really didn't understand communication at the level that I do now, we wouldn't have made it through dating. Let's see, what else is there to tell you about me? What questions do you have? I think that's easier for me.
Well, I guess I can ask questions. So, well, tell us about echo listening and what you do there and how that impacts the people that you work with.
Yeah. So we are a workplace communication consulting firm. And so we do work with our own clients, but we also certify coaches, consultants, HR professionals, internal trainers, and L&D professionals to use our tool inside of their scope of work or within our intact training products and programs. We developed back in 2008, and then it's gone through several iterations and the process of scientific validation, but we developed an assessment tool that measures or identifies the cognitive process of listening, meaning what is it that we tend to prefer to listen to and for, and what might we unintentionally overlook or miss in conversation. So this assessment tool identifies preferences or listening behaviors. It does not identify who we are, meaning our personality traits or things that are hardwired to us. It identifies habits that, of course, we can shift if we develop awareness and intention to be agile in our listening and in our communication. So that's really what it's all about. It's an assessment tool that provides a snapshot into how we tend to filter information. And then it sets a stage for shifting and developing higher quality, more meaningful interactions with people in a work setting, and even more importantly, at times at home with those that we love and have the most special relationships with. So it translates.
It definitely does. And I really can't wait to see what kind of listener Heather is. So when you, when a company reaches out to you for this, why are they doing it? Like, is there like miscommunication within the team? Are there barriers? Like, why would they reach out to you?
Good question. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a meeting, thought that you were really aligned with everyone else that was there in that meeting, that there was a shared mutual understanding? You found out later that actually everyone took away a little bit something different from that very same interaction and same conversation. Everyone heard the same content, had the same discussion, and 6 people walk away with a really different interpretation of what happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is right there, kind of the crux of it, is that, and the reason that this assessment was actually developed in the first place. The woman who developed it initially, a woman named Marian Thayer, she was an executive leadership coach working primarily in the Fortune 100 Fortune 500 space, her observation was that high potential individuals and high potential teams were often derailed because of poor listening. And that was the number one reason that teams and individuals derailed when they really had high potential. So her observation was that, like what I was just talking about, you could have 6 people in a meeting and everyone walks away with a different interpretation of what happened, not because they weren't listening, but because they were all listening to and for very different things. And so this miscommunication, misinterpretation is really costly. Okay? And that not just to the bottom line, but also to relationships. But one of the reasons that I think it's so critically important to look at this is that companies so often think of listening and communication as soft skill training. And I feel very differently about that. And I almost bristle a little bit when we talk about listening and communication being a soft skill, because really, when you look at the metrics that can be measured annually in terms of losses due to misperceptions, miscommunications, poor listening, it's astounding. In Fortune 500 companies, that figure is $32 billion a year can be attributed to poor listening.
Wow.
In companies with 1,000 employees or less, it's 62.4 million. And I can give you a real life example of a company here in Boulder that lost $15,000 due to one miscommunication that wasn't clarified. It was a flyby request that took 4 hours to rectify and cost that company $15,000 in product that had to be tossed into the garbage.
Wow.
One comment. Yeah. That was misinterpreted.
So see, now that's a whole different way to look at it, because I wasn't even looking at it like that. I guess I was looking at it as you were talking, because the way I listen, because of that. So
spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, I'm a brainstormer. But as you were speaking, and I was consuming the information about being in the meeting and coming away with 6 different, hearing 6 different things. I was thinking, well, isn't that a good thing? Because everybody hears something and then they come away with, it's like when you listen to a song, we interpret it in our own way, right? Like some people may listen to a Taylor Swift song and think she's a psychotic murderer, and somebody else may be like, hey, yeah, you go, girl, so they hear the same thing, but differently. So, so I guess I was thinking, is it good to come away with different perceptions, because then you can put those together to form like a better idea? But no, what you're saying is like, if there's that miscommunication, and I'm just going to make it up because I don't know what the scenario was, but hey, we're going to build this product and we're going to put this on it, and you put something else on it. And you're like, oh wait, I thought you meant that. And they're like, no. So that's the
so here's the thing. When you have a meeting and there's cognitive diversity and all these different perspectives are surfaced and shared, and we have a group of people who really genuinely appreciate differences in thinking and seek out every voice, right, to be heard, that can be really valuable. However, if you're in a meeting and you've come to an agreement and you're moving in a certain direction, but you haven't clarified that everyone is on the same page,
yeah,
that's where it becomes an issue, right? So if we have cognitive diversity, appreciation for differences, and clarified meaning, and alignment, then that is magic.
Wow.
So one of the actual outcomes of doing this echo listening work inside of a team is that we do start to appreciate people that we work with, our colleagues, in a way that maybe we haven't previously, because we've created assumptions and opinions about them and what we observe in the way they communicate. And that gets in the way, those personality assumptions often get in the way of solving the real business problems. So this work really breaks down some of those assumptions and those myths that we've developed about the people that we work with. And so we start to actually seek out people who maybe we haven't before because they were more challenging for us to work with. It was hard to get on the same page with them because we didn't appreciate that diversity.
That is so interesting. And the fact that it's all based on science. I mean, this isn't just like, so when somebody calls you in,
Mm-hmm.
is there, like, do they prospectively see a breakdown about to happen, or has the breakdown already occurred and you're brought in to kind of, remedy that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it can kind of be all over the board. What I would say is typically people work with us because they do have either trust issues inside of their team. They have newer to mid-level managers who were incredibly successful individual contributors, and then they're moved or elevated into a leadership position, and they just don't have the communication skills, intuitively that allow them to be really effective, trusted leaders. So that's one of the reasons that we're brought in. Again, there's a team that has personality issues getting in the way of solving their real business problems. So there's waste in their system. There's missed deadlines, wasted resources, conflict. Other times people call us in because they have a culture that's too nice, meaning they haven't established a psychological safety that allows for different perspectives and hole poking and leveraging different thinkers. Sometimes there's too much harmony that's preventing them from really innovating. Wow. So it's all over the board. Sometimes I get called in to work with partners who have started a business together, and they really struggle with decision making. And oftentimes what I find in those situations is their listening profiles are very different, which makes it really difficult to make decisions together if they don't know that about each other, because decision-making criteria is determined by how we think, what we care about, which is related to what we listen to and for, how we speak, what we speak about. So it's all over the board. I mean, I would say that, in any situation where we have to actually communicate with other people, pretty much everything, everywhere, all the time, it's the basic unit of work. That's where this stuff is really effective.
Man, it's just like, it's so fascinating to me that, when I took the assessment, I was reading the questions, and, like with any assessment, right, it asks you the same question differently. But when I was done, it kind of made me look at the way that I listen. And I was telling Allison, I was in a meeting last week, this week, I don't remember, and I was talking, to this guy, and he's talking, and I was so focused on how I was listening that I didn't hear what he said. And, and I told him, I was like, I'm really sorry. I know this is going to sound crazy, but because everybody knows I'm 100% transparent, and yeah. So, but it was just like so funny because I was so focused on how I was listening. I was like, okay, how am I consuming this information? Am I consuming it this way? And all, I heard like the hum in the background, but not what he was saying. And so then I kind of corrected that just in general now, because I still find myself going, how am I listening? But so I know that you're not an entrepreneur, and your story is a lot different. The change that you made was because you were in a really you know, high paying job, and you quit because you were miserable. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I was incredibly successful. I made more money than I ever thought I would make. I had an incredible sphere. I didn't have to do any marketing or real selling. I had a constant influx of clients, and I was emotionally, spiritually barren. I was exhausted. I was so stressed out that I truly believed that if I didn't make a change, I would get cancer. I knew it without, any doubt or hesitation. I believed that I would get cancer if I didn't change. And so in that realization, of course, I started thinking about, well, what's next? What am I capable of? What am I credible enough for? Who would ever hire me given my background? And I was thinking through that lens of what job do I want? What could I be hired for, and what could I produce? And just kept coming up empty. I had no passion at the time. Like I said, I mean, I was vibrating kind of just below the surface and just hanging on, and
Why cancer? Like, why not, like, I could get sick? Why was it specifically? Because you were very specific about cancer. So what? I'm just curious about, and I've been curious about that and been meaning to ask you that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. And frankly, I haven't really thought about before until you just asked this. Why was it cancer? I think if I'm really going to think about it, that it's kind of that insidious shift almost that happens at the cellular level. And at times it's happening, it's in there, it's in your body. You don't even know it's there until it's too late. And that's kind of what it felt like to me, is like, if I don't make a change, I could get to the point where it's too late, and I don't get this time back with my kids. I don't get this magical experience back that I'm missing out on now. I had this sense that I was missing out. And my husband at the time got to have all the fun. He had a job that was very compartmentalized. He was either on duty as a firefighter paramedic and away from home, or he was home and 100% fully present. He had all this time to spend fully present with our kids and do fun stuff. And even when I wasn't working, I was still completely lacking presence and stressed out and pulled somewhere else. So I think that the cancer thing, and why cancer is just that. It's like, when you get it, sometimes it's at the point at which it's too late. And so I had this feeling like, if I don't make a change right now, and 5 years from now, I look back and I remember this moment right now feeling the way I do. And if I haven't done anything, shame on me. And almost this feeling of like, you would deserve it. If you had this writing on the wall that you saw and you did nothing about it, shame on you.
Wow. That's freaking heavy. I mean, that's intense.
Super intense.
Yeah.
It was terrifying because I really did not believe that, and didn't know what I wanted. So I knew I wanted to make a change, but didn't know what I wanted. It was like, I couldn't even think of, if I went back to school, what would I study? But I was sitting on my front porch on my wicker cushioned chair, talking on the phone to a friend. And I can picture it in the place and time and the feeling. And I remember talking to her and saying, I know I need to make a change. This is not sustainable. I really feel like I'm going to get sick. And I said, but I don't know what to do. And I said, the only thing I really know to be true is that at my core, I'm a teacher. I'm a facilitator. And I said, and what I know to be true, and I don't know what it looks like, but what I want is for those on the receiving end of my work to gain something that they can take away and live a better life with. Like they learn something that they can apply to their own life and be happier, live better, live more. And so that was the only thing I knew. And I put it out there to the universe. Like I'm a teacher and I want to help people live a happier, better life because they have something to do that with.
Wow.
Yeah.
And here you are.
And here I am.
So now, was your next step to echo, or was there like a little in between?
Yeah, the next step was to echo, and it's kind of funny how that happened. Yeah, you know, I talk a lot about when we get really clear and when we articulate something to the universe. This is where my Boulder woo-woo is going to come out, but I'm going to try and like, you know, control it a little bit.
I love woo-woo, so I'm woo-woo.
Yeah. But so here's what I really truly believe. And I use this Jedi mind trick to, you know, land my current husband. But what I believe is when you get really clear and you speak it so that others hear it and you speak it out loud, not just think it, I really do believe that, you know, the universe hears you and says, oh, okay, well, now I can give it to you. Now I can provide it to you because you made it clear. So here you go. So I think it was maybe a week or 10 days after I said that on the phone, sitting on the porch, that I was at an event with this friend of mine who is the owner of Echo Listening Intelligence. And she had started the company about a year earlier. And she came from the corporate communication boutique consulting world. The company that she previously worked for worked inside of Fortune 500 companies, primarily HP, Coca-Cola, et cetera. And she started her own business to work with smaller companies doing different things in the world and doing good in the world. So she had started the business about a year earlier. And we were at this event and she said to me, you know, Allison, I'm at the point where I really need to hire someone part-time to help me. And she said, man, I would love for it to be you. But I know you'd never do it because of the money. You know, I can barely pay anything. There's no way you would do it. And of course, you know, my ears perked up and I had no idea how bad the money was that she was talking about initially. But, you know, I was hopeful. So I said, well, you know, what are you talking about in terms of money? And she told me, and truly, if I had been drinking something, I would have spit it out laughing. And I said, yeah, you know, you're right. There's no way that I could do that. And we went about the evening and then, you know, we wrapped up and I was driving home and I thought about it again and I burst into tears. Truly. I can see where I was driving east on Arapahoe Avenue outside of Boulder, heading east. And I can tell you exactly where I was when I started crying. And I was just overwhelmed with this feeling of that's what I want. And the only reason that I'm not doing it is because of money and the fear that had, you know, wrapped up in money. And so crying, and then thought of this book that I had read a couple of years earlier. And one page in this book called The War of Art. And the book, this one page is about resistance. So what is it that prevents us from doing that thing or taking that step that we really want to take, but we're not? So what is that? And the gist of what it said in this page, in this paragraph, was the root of all resistance is fear. So when you're paralyzed by fear, it means it's an endeavor you have to take for the growth of your soul.
Wow.
So crying, I think of that, and I'm paralyzed, and I drive home and I tell my husband at the time, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go to work with Dana. And I shit you not, I went from making, just shy of probably 200,000 a year, upwards of, 160, 170 generally, to making $800 every 2 weeks.
So did your husband like
That's in?
So did your husband like freak? Was he like, holy shit, there's like no money coming in now? Or did he, like how did that, I mean, I know he's your ex now, but
Yeah. So, I mean, supportive, but I think also at the same time a little scared. But I think he saw, that I was on my very last nerve at the it wasn't sustainable for me where we were at that point. So yeah, I mean, there wasn't a battle around it by any means.
So you left your job.
No, I think that we both thought that I would be immediately successful, as I had been in every single job I had ever taken or any new role from my first job at 14 years old. I mean, I had never had an experience in my professional life or career where I hadn't taken on a new role or a new career and hadn't just killed it from the get-go. And so I think the expectation was, right, I'm going to nail it. Immediately, it's, this is just a very, very temporary decrease in income. And it took a solid 12 to 15 months to become even competent. It was the hardest time, I think, of my life in terms of the third-party gaze on myself and the voice with which I spoke to myself about my competency, efficacy, productivity, worthiness, so much wrapped up in producing and worthiness, work ethic and worthiness. So it was hard. There were probably 3 different times during that 15-month period where I was like, screw it, I need to quit and get a real job. I left out a really big piece of this, which is that 3 months after I left my job, I left my marriage. Yeah. I forgot about that part. Yeah, that's big.
I was gonna throw it in there, but I figured I'd wait for you to, because I was listening to what you were saying, and I wanted you to be.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
And so you left your marriage.
Yeah.
Making basically like $100,000 less than you were making. More than that.
What I was making before, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And so, and now you're, a single mom. Like, holy shit. That's just, wow.
But do you want to hear something crazy? Because how I was talking about presence and lacking presence and really being very aware of the fact that I couldn't be there for my kids when I was as stressed as I was. What's really funny is, my entire career I've worked from home. So I had, the luxury of being able to drop my kids at school and pick them up from school during my work day, despite the stress and the overwhelm that I was in the midst of all the time. But so I was always around when my kids were home. But when I took on this new position with Dana and Echo Listening Intelligence, I actually went into the office 20 hours a week. And so there were times where I wasn't home when the kids got home or left or whatever. Other people picked them up, or, my former husband, whatever that was. I wasn't there all the time. And it was probably a couple months after, making that shift, that my daughter came into my room at night before bed and kind of did one of these. She was 11 or 12 at the time, and did one of those kind of flop on the bed and, one of these, Mom, and she's like, it's really nice, Mom. She goes, it's so great having you around more.
Yep. And you were like, huh? I'm around less.
Yeah. And it was almost like a gut punch, and so validating that I had made the right choice. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She felt me there. Yeah.
It's such an incredible journey. And you just kept going. I mean, you didn't quit. You kept going. And now you're, the executive director you're running the place. Yeah. So, there are like entrepreneurs listening to this, and you didn't necessarily leave and start your own business, but you weren't happy where you were and you left. Yeah. So, and actually, I don't even know if that's really going to play in this. And I know you don't miss corporate because you were there and miserable. So with Echo, I know that you don't own it, but you run it. And in running it, you have, what are some obstacles that you've come against that, were really kind of hard to get to the other side of that you have?
Yeah. That's a good question. In the beginning, when I made the shift, the biggest obstacle was just depth of knowledge. And I wasn't a subject matter expert. And it wasn't even that I had imposter syndrome. It truly was that I wasn't an expert. I wasn't really competent initially. So in order to get where I am now, there was just an investment of time and learning and education to kind of set myself up for the success that I have now. So that was a huge obstacle, is just having time to learn, to integrate, to visceralize. And I would say, really practice the work. If you do any kind of coaching, consulting, teaching, training of anything where you're providing this depth of knowledge to someone else, I think you have to live it, breathe it. It has to become cellular for you in order to be really an expert in delivering it in a way that it lands and makes a difference. So I would say that 12 to 15 months of leaving a marriage and going through a divorce process, mind you, with no lawyers or mediators involved, because I use this work to get through all of that negotiation and difference of perspective. And really, I walked the talk, and Wow. It was not easy. And it's something that I'm most proud of, really, is, I think if someone said, like, of course my kids, but also I would say, like, yeah, I had the best divorce anyone could ever have. Like, I killed it. I rocked that shit. Right?
You listen, right? You listen. You listened with a different, and it's so funny because, and not funny when divorce happens, but again, people hear what they hear, yeah. Right? And if it especially in that kind of a intensely charged, emotional, personal thing, you're saying one thing, he's probably hearing something else. He's saying one thing, you're hearing exactly what he's saying because you're really good at listening now. So how did
here's the thing. Listening doesn't stand alone, right? Listening intelligence is a skill or an agility that we can develop over time when we're really aware of our own stuff. We're really genuinely interested in recognizing what's important to someone else. and understanding what's important to someone else, learning what's important to someone else, and then being able to adapt to that. But what that requires is emotional agility, right? Being able to manage ourselves when we're really triggered or we perceive some kind of threat. So this combination of listening, emotional agility, and conflict is really so powerful in our personal relationships, but also in work, because when we are triggered, when we're in the midst of an amygdala hijack, we are not using the thinking, reasoning, discerning part of our brain.
No.
Right? Which means we cannot listen, which means often the way that we show up in those situations is detrimental to a resolution of a conflict. What it does is it escalates a conflict. So I don't think we can look at listening just as a standalone. The profile or the assessment itself is just one little piece of the puzzle in developing self-awareness that we then have to apply in these other contexts to have really successful and meaningful outcomes in combination with other people, right? So that was what I brought to this whole divorce situation navigation was, okay, when I am triggered, I know that my listening is going to shut down. So what do I need to do in order to stay in this as a valuable contributor? So my kind of go-to question for myself when I thought he was talking crazy, right? My go-to question to myself is, what am I missing? What do I need to know or learn that I don't know right now? So it got me into this mode of authentic curiosity of what was at stake for him in that. So it allowed me to ask an open-ended question to gain more information, not necessarily to agree, but to understand, to better then be able to make some sort of, or have some sort of informed response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. What I find interesting is that self-awareness, because a lot of people would pretty much be like, you want what? Fuck you. I mean, it would be a trigger and it would be an automatic, Michelle, take a sip of wine. It would be like, I know she's laughing right now. She's driving or doing something going, really? But because when you're in that, again, emotionally charged situation, for you to be able to be that self-aware of the fact that, they're thinking or feeling something else and you want to be in touch, that's amazing, because I don't know how many people could do that. And which is why, the lawyers do it, right? But to me, that is a level of self-awareness that people just, they don't come by it easily. And that's
here's where I think it comes from. It's, what do we really want the outcome to be? And so my intention is always like, how do I want to live? How do I want to feel? How do I want to be? How do I want to show up? I don't want animosity in my life. I don't want to be spending energy, on acrimony and negativity. And what I saw in this whole process was collaboration, right? And that we created a dynamic together that we both had ownership in and responsibility for. He wasn't the enemy. He wasn't, the bad guy. I created my own perfect dysfunction as well. And so having that awareness, I think, even more than self-awareness, was just like, no one's to blame here. And we together have to get to the other side of this. And everyone's got to be healthy when we get there. The kids, you, me, because we're going to spend the rest of our lives in relationship with one another until we die. Right? Because we share these two other humans. And so I just thought, how do I want to live? I want to be able to stand on the sidelines and watch my son play lacrosse and celebrate his success with his dad. I don't necessarily want to go on vacation with him, you know, but I want to be able to have joy in sharing these two people that we have together. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight with anyone. I want to listen and learn something. And yeah.
But I still think it's self-awareness to be able to tap into that, because you are aware that you don't want that conflict and you don't want that, you know, so to be able to tap into that and realize that you know, want a collaboration, you know, I mean, I think it's amazing. I don't know that I could do that now. I think, you know, on certain levels, I'm extremely self-aware. But I'm more aware of my gut and my instinct and not, you know, the other person. Now, my wife is a different story.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, yes, self-awareness is so critically important. To be an effective leader, you have to be really self-aware. But I think in addition to that, you have to be really committed to showing up in a way that you can be trusted and perceived as someone with control and with emotional agility, right? Just self-awareness alone. You know, if you have a leader that's flying off the handle and is dismissing people and diminishing people, but they're really self-aware and they say, hey, I know I'm an asshole. I get it.
I get what you're saying. You have,
you know what I mean? That self-awareness alone isn't enough. It's okay, you have self-awareness, but do you also have a commitment to modifying behaviors that have impact?
Yeah.
And I think that's the next step that's so important for people.
Yeah.
Right.
So being self-aware, but also being able to, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That puts it in more in a clearer perspective, because especially leaders, you're 100% right. Because I've had people that I've worked for and they're like, I know I'm an asshole. And it's like, that doesn't make me want to fucking work for you because you know you're an asshole.
I hear it a lot. Yeah. I hear it a lot. People are like, listen, I know I'm really blunt. I rub people the wrong way. You know, my direct reports are afraid of me. And you know, I get shit done.
Right.
And I think, but you know, really, that self-awareness alone, it's not quite enough if you really want to develop and help people evolve and improve their career trajectory someday. Right. And that's what leadership is really all about.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
So that self-awareness of, hey, you know what? I know I rub people the wrong way. I know that I can ask questions that people feel challenge their credibility when really I'm getting at the information and it's not about them as a person. Like, I know that I do that. So what I'm really trying to do is change the way that I ask questions to develop more insight through open-ended questions. Now that is self-awareness and behavior modification based on, you know, what we learn and what we know. And that's really effective leadership. That's what I'm out to achieve with the work.
I love the combination. So are there other companies like Echo out there, or are you the only one?
We are the only company that has a scientifically validated assessment tool that identifies habitual listening preferences, or the cognitive process of listening. There's no one else doing this work with a tool like this. So yeah, we're mavericks, so to speak.
No kidding. That's your differentiator. So How did this come about? Like, how did Dana go, I want to do this listening thing, and, kind of figure out a way to, get people to learn to
Yeah.
listen?
Oh, that's a great question, because really where she came from was the speaking side of communication. So she worked for a company that went in and helped very large companies. Like I said, our Fortune 500s, our HPs, our Coca-Colas. She helped them develop their speaking skills. She met this woman, Marion Thayer, who had a company called Listening Impact at the time, and was the original developer of the tool. At that time, it was called Hear Your Listening Portfolio. It was not scientifically validated, and it was developed with psychometricians and psychobehavioralists, and it really did prove her theory, but there wasn't science behind it. Dana, from the speaking side of communication, was blown away by Marion's work in listening, and they developed a partnership. A couple of years later, I think it was back in probably 2014-ish, Dana bought Marion out of the business and took the assessment. At the time, I was involved with the company. We took the assessment through that rigorous process of validation. The results were then published in a peer-reviewed paper in the International Journal of Listening. So that's kind of where it started, was that, coming from this place, and where many people come from, right, which is speaking. When I go into a group or do a keynote, a large talk, and I ask people to raise their hand, how many people in the room have had formal instruction on speaking? And 90% of the hands go up. Okay, great. How many of you have had any kind of formal training in listening? And if I'm lucky, 1 to 3 hands go up in the room. It just is not part of training and development curriculum inside of companies or organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it should be in sales corporations, because holy crap, I mean, and we talked about this when I was, and I don't do sales for a living. I have my marketing agency, but I do have to speak with people. And when they speak, I do have to listen. But when I listen, like what happened with the kennel, they were talking and they were telling me about what they did. And as they're talking and I'm looking around, I'm like, this is a community. Because that's how I think, because it's conceptual and, all the other things. And I think that if people that were in sales actually listened, I'm not going to say properly, but they listened to listen and not listen and, waited to talk. Because a lot of salespeople listen to talk. Like, they don't even really listen. They're like, okay, here's my spiel. Because they do it to me. And I'll be like,
that's conversational muscle memory, right? That's what I call it, conversational muscle memory. We are taught to have an answer, to respond, right? To be smart, to be an expert. And we think that we have to problem solve and have a solution right away.
Right. And that's how I'm wired. I'm always trying to troubleshoot. And, you have a problem? I'll solve it. We'll figure it out. We'll get this done. Well, like I said, I've been more cognizant now. So I think I'm starting to listen a little bit differently, which is kind of funny, because I never thought about it. And now even now, like listening, to you speak, and how I'm consuming it, I'm sure that, the audience is hearing probably something else than, what I'm hearing at this point. Which is, it kind of, it's it boggles my mind, I think, on some level, because how we perceive things, differently. So I have like so many questions. So we know your differentiator is that there's nobody out there doing it like this, where it's science. So how did the scientific piece come in? Like, did she just say, okay, we're going to go and we're going to get this certified? Or was this like, we are actually going to put a science behind this so that this is science-based?
Yes and yes. So in the assessment space, inside of corporate training and L&D, no one is going to purchase your product unless there's science behind it. So, in order to make the assessment tool really marketable and, revenue generating, we really felt a strong need to undergo that process of scientific validation. Did the assessment itself change much during that process based on what we learned through that research? No. Every now and then, we had to change a word or two in a question, but it didn't really change the outcome, which was the proof that it is valid and that there is evidence for validity in terms of face validity and content validity and construct. So I think that may or may not satisfy your question, but did we have to do that? No. Did we need to do that? Yes.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Because it's true, when science is behind something, people are a lot more, I think, apt to be like, oh, okay, this isn't just like a like fly by night idea. There's actual, science backing this. For those of us who believe in science. Sorry, I had to.
You and I are talking about the assessment from this place of curse of knowledge, I think. Whereas a lot of your listeners have no idea what we're talking about, because you've seen the model, you understand the model, which is based on, there are 4 main quadrants or main habits in listening that were identified in the research and the development of the tool. Right? One axis has kind of more of this human component, which is connective listening and reflective listening, an external lens versus an internal lens. How does this impact others versus how does this impact me, my situation, my role? So those are, 2 of the habits. The others are analytical and conceptual, which is really more oriented towards content. What is versus what could be. So what is accurate and validated and proven and trustworthy versus what's inspired by this? What is possible? Potentiality. So we've got these 4 habits in listening that we can either be single dominant in, or we can be a combination, dual, triple, sometimes even non-dominant. But that's really the model, is that the assessment identifies the type of information that we prefer to listen to and for, meaning it's easiest for us. It's most comfortable. It's most engaging. And then, of course, there's content or people that we might be in communication with that's more challenging for us to be in communication with.
Yes.
Right. And so knowing that about ourselves is important.
Right. So talk about it from not our point of view. Talk about it from somebody, brand new, because like you said, people, so, for an example, you could be in a meeting and somebody's droning on, and this is for the audience, right? They're droning on, and you are checked out.
Yeah.
You are checked out because, that's not, whatever they're saying isn't engaging to you. And so you are not listening with not the right ears, but how would you, well, explain.
I think that often we put the pressure on others to engage us, right? So if they're speaking about something that doesn't engage us, we almost blame them. So with Echo and the work that we do, we really encourage folks to own it, right? If I'm not engaged in what someone else is speaking about, I need to acknowledge I'm distracted. I'm impatient, whatever that is. And I need to take it upon myself to shift and attempt to listen to learn. And what that means often is re-engaging with a question or an open-ended question that will allow me to be more interested in what is spoken, because this is brain science. When we are interested in something, we are less distracted.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yep. So if I can ask a question from genuine curiosity about something that I want to learn or know, or some information that I want to obtain, it's much more likely that I'll be able to engage. Here's a flip side to that. If I am speaking and I'm really aware of my audience, then hopefully I'm going to shift the way that I deliver my message based on what I observe they need, based on the statements they make, based on their language choices, based on the questions that they're asking me. I can pick up cues and clues as to what type of listener someone is, often by the types of statements and the questions that they ask. If I'm willing to do that, if I'm willing to slow down and pause and be aware, I can begin to shift my message and craft my message so that I know that it lands for them. That's where this stuff gets really, really valuable in sales, right? If I'm a sales professional and I tend to just pitch, right, or I rely entirely on rapport, I might be completely missing the mark. What I need to do is ask open-ended questions, listen to their word choices, and that will give me a sense of what's important to them, so that when I share, I'm speaking directly into what's easiest for them to listen to and for, and what they care about. And how respectful is that, instead of just droning on with a pitch?
Extremely. And I think that's what people need. So any sales companies out there that are listening, or really any companies that, that are listening, that was an accident, but, that are tuning in, how's that? Well, same thing, listening, either way. Definitely reach out to you, because I think it's so interesting. And from having, taken the assessment, I kind of like chuckled at the end, because I know I'm a brainstormer. And when it came up brainstormer, I was like, oh. And then when I read it, I was like, oh, so it made me but it made me aware. And I thought that was cool. Like it, I've never thought of it before. I always.
So you are the perfect, you are the poster child of what we're out to achieve with this, right? Because the profile itself isn't the end all be all. What we want people to walk away with is this greater presence and self-awareness. So in communication right now, where am I at? What am I relying on? I know my habitual preferences, but right now, is that really serving this situation and the people involved? So that is what I call listening intelligence. And so you are exhibiting that now and noticing that now as you're stepping into some of these conversations at work and at home. And so you're like I said, the poster child. That's what we're out to achieve with this, is just presence, awareness, desire to acknowledge, and then shift. And then the magic happens.
Yeah. And it was funny because I had this thing happen today. How can I say this without, I don't care. I'm in a networking group, and we each hold a seat, right? We hold our seat, and my seat is the marketing chair. So I have the marketing chair, and I do all the things marketing. And somebody who was speaking today had held a different chair, but was talking about some of the things that I do. And rather than, and this was where I thought about it, because rather than listening to what she was listening to or what she was saying as a whole, I honed in on the one thing that was a threat to me. And it was like, oh, she's not supposed to be talking about that. She's not supposed to be doing that. And that's not me usually, right? Like I'm usually, but I was so triggered because of stuff that had happened previously that, I'm texting the president and I'm like, what the is this? She's not supposed to be talking about this. And I left. And then I said, I'm because I had a meeting, so I had to leave the meeting early while she was still talking. So I left going, I don't know what she's saying now. And, and I'm doing mindfulness. I'm trying to like, zen in and pretty much, right? Like, where is this threat coming from? And I knew where it was coming from. But what was funny was when I got home and I thought about it, I started thinking, where did the threat come from? And was I really listening to what she was saying? No, because as soon as my little threat radar came up, I didn't hear another freaking thing that she said. I mean, I heard what she said, but I was zeroed in on the one thing. So I spoke to the president because we're friends, and she always talks me down. She's like, you're amazing. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, I know, but this just really, struck a nerve with me. And then I started laughing because I knew you and I were talking today. And and I said, I called Heather up and I said, this is like so funny because, the assessment that we were talking about that I want you to take has to do with listening. I said, and I completely checked out. And I checked out because this like threat thing came up and it took away, I allowed it to take away my listening ability to the rest of it. And it was really freaking interesting because I almost called you, but I was like, it's 7:00 in Boulder. I'm not going to call you.
But so here's the thing. I want to give you something that will allow you to go a little bit easier on yourself. Okay. When we are threatened or triggered in some way, we are physiologically wired to detect threat. Okay.
Is that
so
the amygdala hijack?
This is the amygdala hijack. I'll just explain really quickly what this
happened to me by this. Basically. Okay.
When our brain perceives a threat, in 0 to 3 seconds, our amygdala responds and overtakes what is possible with our prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking, reasoning, discerning part of the brain. Our brains, we are hardwired physiologically to detect and protect ourselves from threat. Now, the brain cannot distinguish between a real threat of someone coming at us with a knife, for example, and a social threat, like someone diminishing us in a work setting or disagreeing with us or, whatever it is that they're saying we feel threatened by. We're going to have an amygdala response. When we have that amygdala hijack, we are incapable of listening and thinking and reasoning and discerning until we recover the prefrontal cortex.
Wow.
And it takes a minimum of 10 to 12 seconds, minimum 10 to 14, I believe, actually, to recover the prefrontal cortex. So we have to buy ourselves time. And we have to buy ourselves time with, one tool is a go-to question. It's a question that we use no matter what the situation is, no matter who the people are. It is our go-to. It's already established. We don't have to think about it because we can't. So it's a question that we don't even have to answer fully, but that takes us out of that hijack and into thinking, reasoning, discerning. Wow. And hopefully generous assumption. So I think I told you, I gave you the example when my former husband would say something in this whole divorce process that lit me up and I had my hands on the keyboard or I'm about to, my go-to question was always, what am I missing? What do I need to know or learn right now that I don't know yet? And so it shifts the brain into thinking, reasoning, right? Curiosity, generous assumption. So that generous assumption, that's a big one, right? Like in that moment today where you were so triggered, if you had paused and said, right, if I'm going to have the most generous assumptions about this woman and her intentions, what would that be? And that can take you right off the edge
Oh yeah.
or ledge or what it is ever right there. But
She's
so
the
basically what I'm
sweetest
saying,
she's the sweetest person. Like if she even knew that I was thinking it, she would cry. So like I'm never going to tell her. And hopefully she doesn't listen to this one. And if she does, it's fine.
yeah, by now she's probably like, I'm over her.
Whatever. But
Yeah.
she is seriously the sweetest person in the world, and I know that she would never do anything, on purpose. So, but at that moment, it was just like, did I read her wrong? Am I like all this shit went through my brain, and I was like, oh my god, and so yeah, but it was really interesting that I came back. It wasn't 14 seconds, but I did start thinking about what we were talking about, what we've been talking about, and so it brought me back a little. And then when
the gist of what I'm saying is like, give yourself a break because it's physiology. It's not just you that you weren't capable of managing in that moment. It was, once you develop a tool that you can use reliably to manage that amygdala, then, golden.
Cool. So I want to thank you so much for taking time. We're I told you we'd go over an hour. I knew we were going to go over an hour. For taking the time out of your day to talk to me and my audience.
Such
I really
a
want to thank you for that, because this has been so educational. I mean, I know Kofi is on the back end going, holy shit. Because he always gleans nuggets from every, episode, because he's in the back, so it's cool. But the last question that I ask all my guests is, what lights your fire?
Okay, this is going to fear to some extent. And when I say that is really more like putting myself in a position to have to take a really deep breath, trust myself, and do it anyway, even though I'm terrified. When I get to the other side of it and I come out and I'm okay, and it's been okay, and I did okay, that feeling is like the most energizing feeling. And specifically, I would say where that really plays in is on my mountain bike. When I am terrified to ride something really technical, and I slow myself down and go, you know what, you can do this because you're capable, and you just need to trust in that capability. And then I do it. There is nothing like that feeling, especially at 51 years old, riding with my 22-year-old daughter when she's, literally we went to the bike park, the downhill, up at Winter Park last year, and she was in front of me. She's just a ridiculous rider. She was in front of me, and she actually, and I'm behind, and she had stopped briefly at a feature, and she just yelled out, she goes, just get your ass back and ride it. And I did, and I got to the bottom of it, and she was like, holy shit, Mom. Holy shit. Did you see? And I turned around, I looked at what I just rode, and I was like, there's no moment that I feel more alive than I did right then and there. So fear and capability is a competency. Yeah.
That, and it's not a bad fear. It's like, it's almost like a challenge. I love that. That is so amazing.
Yeah. I should hashtag get your ass back and ride it as a tattoo.
Yes. Oh, totally. Totally. And that could mean, anyway, I'm not, anyway.
Oh,
I'm just, anyway, don't go anywhere. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience and I'll come right back. So,
perfect.
so everybody, thank you so much. I know we went over an hour 15 this time. Thank you so much for hanging in there. I hope that you got a lot of nuggets out of this episode. This is like one of my favorite episodes. There is just so much information in here. If you like this, if you got anything out of this, please like, share, subscribe, download. We're at like 2,800 downloads now, which is like insane. Thank you so much. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Most people are listening on Apple. Go subscribe. When you subscribe, anywhere, you get a notification of a new episode when it comes out. Really, I appreciate each and every one of you. You make me better each week at what I'm doing. I love this. This is like my passion project. I want to thank Inovia Behavioral Health for sponsoring us, which I still can't believe we have a sponsor. But that's like amazing. So thank you. Appreciate you all. I'm grateful for you all. Go out and find what lights your fire. I'll see you next time. Bye.